Are you looking for inspiration on a daily basis? Well, check out Deal to Heal Teas. With our inspirational teas, you're sure to find something that will inspire you. Just go to dealtohealteas.myshopify.com. That's Deal to Heal Teas. Get some inspiration in your situation. Wear inspirational tea and be inspired all day. That's Deal to Heal Teas at dealtohealteas.myshopify.com. Hi guys, if you're enjoying this podcast, then I know you'll enjoy the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast. I'm your host, Earnest James. And on my podcast, my guests and I discuss topics and ways to help us to heal in every area of our lives. I believe that everyone can and should live a life that is whole, healed, and healthy. And therefore, I'm on a mission to help people to deal, heal, and fulfill, to deal with their problems, heal from the pain, and to fulfill their purpose. So check out our podcast. We're on Google Podcasts, Spotify, or even on Audible. And if you want to watch the podcast, check us out on our YouTube channel at Deal to Heal with E. James Podcast. Until then, see you soon. Welcome to the Girl Dad Discussions podcast with E. James. We believe that the relationship between a dad and daughter is one of the most important relationships in a woman's life. Our mission is to promote the daddy-daughter relationship by spreading the voices of girl dads to the world and give love and support to all of our dads and their daughters. Let's get to it. Let's tune in. Welcome to the Girl Dad Discussions podcast. I am your host, Earnest James, and I believe that the relationship between a dad and his daughter is one of the most important relationships in a young lady's life. And therefore, our mission is to promote the voices of girl dads and their relationship by spreading the voices of girl dads to the world in order to combat the narrative of the absent father and the fatherless daughter. I'm trying to talk so fast. I'm stumbling over my words. So make sure you guys, first of all, thank you guys for being here. If you haven't already, make sure that you listen, like, subscribe, and share to the podcast on all of your social media platforms. And also make sure you guys are checking us out on our new YouTube channel, which is the Deal to Heal Podcasting Network channel. Again, that's the Deal to Heal Podcasting Network channel because we are bringing you more than just one podcast. And so you can go there and check out the Girl Dad Discussions podcast, which you are currently listening to, but you also can find the Deal to Heal with E. James podcast there also. So make sure you guys go there and check us out. And we definitely appreciate it. If you would, again, listen, like, subscribe, and share the podcast with all of your friends and family, right? Letting people know that we are here. Also, you guys can go check out our ebook, The Core Four, which is the Core Four Values that every daughter should get from her father, which is an ebook that I wrote. And we will talk about it a little bit toward the end of the episode. In our last segment of the episode, but make sure you guys go to ebooks.ejames.com in order to get your copy of the Core 4 ebook, which is the Core 4 Values that every daughter should receive from her father. All right, so today, just like any other day, we are blessed with the guest, Mr. Dustin. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
No problem. First of all, let me say thank you for being here because you could have been doing anything else with anyone else, especially being a girl dad yourself. I know you have other things you could have been doing, but you're here with me, and I definitely appreciate it. So we're going to jump right in. Dustin, do me a favor. Introduce yourself to my audience and tell us a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do.
Obviously, I'm Dustin. Married to my wife, Annalise. You've had on your show just recently, I think. We have two kids. My oldest is my daughter, who is turning 5 next year, early next year. My son is 2, turning 3 by the end of this year. And they're all energy. And I love every moment of being a dad. Self-employed with a little bit of a unique scenario where my wife and I are both active in the household. We're both in the picture. They could be kind of its own challenge, but it's kind of how we've wanted to set up our life. So we are the number one influence in our kids' lives.
Right, amazing, amazing. So I'm gonna start off by asking the question that I ask all my girl dads. What does it mean to you to be a girl dad?
Uh, Journey of a humble pie. The realization that I don't have all the answers, and um, that I need to lean on uh, more of a concrete process than what I have understood. I didn't grow up with sisters, so I'm not as knowledgeable about girls per se. Um, so having a daughter come into my life has really changed a lot of my perspective. And it's really it's actually, if anything, it has changed me more than um, anything. I knew that just the moment my daughter came into the world, there's been like 3 or 4 times in my life that I knew I changed instantly and I wasn't going to be the same. And the moment I heard her cry for the first time, and after I told him to wipe all the junk off of her and wrap her like a Chipotle burrito and hand her to me,
Burrito.
I knew that I would do anything after wiping her off. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Um, Once she was given to me, it was I just knew from that moment forward that this was going to be a lifelong process of change.
All right, all right. So let's go back a little bit then in this process. How did you find out that you were going to be a dad at that time? Was you guys actively trying to have a child, or was it just like, hey, surprise?
For us, this might rub some people wrong. It's just kind of a lot of the conversation my wife and I had is we wanted our children. We didn't want to look at them and say that they were a happy accident. We had structured everything, not in a sense of trying to control everything, but like they were a very happy pursuit.
Hmm.
And we know we wanted children. I didn't, for me, I know some people are like, I want a son first or whatever. I know I just wanted children, and I didn't really care if it was a boy or a girl. The idea of having a girl really intimidated me a lot. Um, just because I look at with a boy, it's like, I'm a boy, I can do this. With a girl, you know, I just felt like I wasn't really equipped or ready. So I sweated a little bit during the 9 months, but I think it's why we get the privilege of 9 months, so that I could wrap my mind around what it was that I was about to experience. But I can honestly look at both of our children and say, we wanted you. There's been
Hmm.
a very steady pursuit, especially in our marriage. A lot of evidence saying that we actively pursued our children. They were kind of a planned event, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah,
So,
yeah, it definitely does. And I think that's sort of the way to go about it. You know what I mean? Like that there's for years has been a progression of how these things are supposed to work. It's like you meet, you get married, you have children, and then it kind of go in that era in that order um for years. And nowadays they mix the order all up. You know
right.
what I'm saying? But definitely from a father standpoint and a provider standpoint, if we can plan ahead and put those things in order as we are um, as men, first of all, but then also as fathers, as we are kind of wired to do, to follow, things in order. It kind of works better that way. So
Right.
definitely. So on another note, did you guys? wait to find out the sex of the baby, or did you guys find out before?
No, we were pretty open. I think it was actually kind of a funny situation because on my side of the family, to the best of my knowledge, my daughter is the first girl on my side of the family within like 4 generations.
Hmm.
Um, and then my son, I think, um, is like the first on, I think, on her side of the family and multiple generations as well. So my mom wanted a daughter so bad. So I have 3 brothers, and she was so convinced that my second youngest brother was a girl. This is back before like all the technology and everything that we have.
Hmm.
Um, and so she was so committed with the belief that it was going to be a girl. I guess they didn't do the gender check or anything like that. So when he was born, my mom had painted the nursery pink. She had bought all pink everything. So my brother Kyle actually came. She came wrapped in pink and everything because my mom wanted a girl. Well, she never had girls, and so she had 4 boys. So when my daughter Lily came into the picture, Lilybet, um, my mom has been ecstatic. And it was kind of a fun reveal because once we learned what it was, we invited my mom in to see the ultrasound. She was there while they were doing the ultrasound. And they had this massive, it was like a 70-inch TV or something, massive TV up on the wall. And the young lady was, doing the gel and everything on her tummy. And my mom was like literally like an inch away from the TV. Her nose is, and she's telling the lady not to reveal it because my mom was wanting to guess. And so she's like, I've had 4 boys. I know what I'm doing. And so she was right up on the TV. And my mom kept vacillating between whether it was going to be a boy or a girl. And so we kind of looked at her and we said, final answer, because we need to do this because like we're holding people up. And my mom goes, it's a boy. Well, and she started pointing to in this picture, and she said, I think this is, he's a boy. And my wife and I already kind of knew. And what was funny was in the picture, in the ultrasound, because it was a live ultrasound, my daughter had her butt facing my mom's face in this picture. So my mom's nose was like an inch away from the crack and on this massive thing. Well, right when my mom made the guess, I guess Lily heard it. Lily rolled over and the lady laughed and she said, no, it's a girl. To watch that anticipation and that surprise, really that joy bubble up in my mom.
Yeah.
So watching her leave that appointment because she got her wish, so to speak. She's now got a granddaughter that she gets to spoil a little bit.
Yeah, I'm
She was
sure.
really kind of pensive, kind of like just processing it, but watching her really kind of grow into all that. And it's funny because when she gets around the family, she doesn't ask about my son because she's already had 4 boys. She's like, where's my girl? And so this girl has been, she has been very loved, especially by my mom, because I think it's been kind of a prayer answered in that area too.
Yeah.
So
I love it. I love it. Well, I have 5 sisters. It's actually 9 of us all together. So I have 5 sisters and 3 brothers. And so definitely had the opportunity to have sisters. So my mom and I had sisters first. I'm the oldest boy, but I got 3 older sisters. So by the time I came along, it was like, whew, it's had a boy finally, and I know my dad was happy. So yeah, but I can definitely understand the joy in that moment. And I wish I don't know if you guys did like record it or whatever, but definitely would be a moment to remember. That was
yeah,
awesome.
that's an area I could probably get better at. I'm not a big picture record person just because oftentimes
Mhm,
I'm just kind of in the moment. And so
mhm.
by the time a cutesy moment or whatever is kind of there, it's kind of past. And it's like, well, hindsight is I should have taken a picture. Um, I would say, believe it or not, one of the really cool things that has been a privilege to me is when my daughter was born, I knew that it was going to have an impact on me. But so she was born 1 week before they closed everything down back in 2020.
Mm.
So uh, there was a bit of a hustle of trying to get us out of the hospital. When my wife and I, we were ignoring on kind of what was going on, world events, because we were kind of caught up into some things that we were just kind of focused on baby, if that makes sense. And
Mhm.
my dad came. He was one of my mom and my dad were one of the first people to come visit us while we were in the hospital, and and we had wrapped Lily up and everything like that. And my dad never had a girl, and so prior to this, there was a scenario where my dad had a battle with cancer, and my dad and I had some very lengthy conversations. He said I was preaching at him. Maybe I was, maybe I wasn't. But basically, I was putting a lot of pressure on him to put some fight into his scenario. We thought he was going to roll over and just kind of give into whatever the battle was. And I had a loving conversation with him one night in a parking lot outside of a movie theater. I think we went to go watch Star Wars or something like that. And my youngest brother ended up going home. And so my dad and I were just talking. And so I just got pretty transparent with him. And everybody else was kind of freaking out over this diagnosis or this opinion of cancer. And most people were freaking out about the unresolved offenses versus thinking about my dad's well-being. And I remember sitting down with my dad, and I just told him, I said, Dad, you do know you let this beat you. And I was like, I don't have a crystal ball, but I'm like, it's up to you. There's a lot of things that are out of my control, but I was like, if you, just understand what you're leaving behind, a lot of unfinished stuff that somebody else has to clean up. And I said, I don't think your job here is done. And I was pushing on it. It was like a 2-hour long conversation where we were going back and forth, and he wouldn't commit. At the end of it, he looked at me and said, Son, I'm not letting this beat me. And I said, all right, great, I'm done. Got in my car, and I literally just got in the car, ended the conversation. I went home, drove 45 minutes back home. And he just kind of looked at me. He was like, that's it? And I said, yeah, I just wanted to see you get in the fight. I said, through this process, through our conversation, there was no attitude of fight. Like, you were not in it. You were literally this posture of you were defeated. And I was like, I just wanted to see my dad get into the fight. I was like, I was okay with him passing. I had already, made my peace and all that with it. But I was just letting him know, like, the history, the legacy that he was going to leave behind. So when he was cleared of his cancer and he's in remission and all that, and he had beat his battle, when he came in and he sat down in a chair, my dad kind of, he's not an emotional guy, I'll say it that way. And so he thought he was going to sit there in a corner and kind of mind his own business, and he was going to let my mom have her experience with it. And I said, give me my daughter. I went over to my wife and I went over to my mom and I said, give me my daughter. And so my mom kind of reluctantly gave me my daughter. And I walked straight over to my dad and I shoved my daughter right into his arms. And I said, this is your reward. I said, this is your reward for winning, for getting into the fight. I said, you get to see the first daughter born. And I said, this is your privilege as a grandpa. And I said, I hope you enjoy it. And I remember watching my dad first time in like 40 years. I was younger than that, but I was like maybe in my 30s. But the first time in 30 plus years that I watched my dad start crying. And that moment will forever be etched in my life. But the really cool thing about having a daughter is I've watched how my daughter Lilybeth has also softened my dad over the 5 years. I've watched my dad change and how he's kind of adjusted to this new identity of being a grandpa, not only to a boy, but to a girl. And so I've had the privilege of sitting back and watching this interaction between my daughter and my dad. And it's been really, really cool. So I can't say all that was planned, but they have been very pleasant, unexpected rewards that I've had so much fun with. And I think my dad, whenever we get around each other, he's like, you're not going to preach at me again. And I'll be like, and I'll let him know, I'm like, why do you need me to? But I think he's appreciative that I kind of got on his case because I think he's really enjoying the season right now. So it's been pretty cool.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. My dad is kind of on the opposite side now, right? Because he got 9 kids. So I think on the low end, his kids have one. Like I have one, which is biological, which is my daughter. On the high end, my second oldest sister, I think she has 11 kids. So from 11 to 1 of 9, there's plenty of grandkids. And so now we already started. We're into the generation now where my dad is having great grandkids now. And so now when he comes around and they're like, hey, and granddad hold the baby, he's like, nope.
I've been there,
He's
done that,
like,
right?
no. He said, I'll watch them. I'll make sure they good. Y'all, but y'all can keep all that.
Right. You guys are doing well, right?
Right. He was like, no,
Right.
y'all can have it. I'm done with that part. He was like, I'll call me when they start running around.
Right.
But that's great story, man. Let's go back a little bit. You talked about your dad and your mom definitely loving this experience that they had to experience with their first granddaughter. But how was your experience? I know you mentioned about, just being the first one there after they cleaned her up and, wrapped her up to give to you. But even bringing her home as a new dad and a girl dad, how was that experience for you, and kind of realizing like, all right, this is a new role now.
It actually took about a month. I'd probably say about a month to 3 months for it to really kind of sink in, because like in the early stages, like you can't really do anything with them. They're on a rhythm, especially if like the mom's breastfeeding. You kind of wrap them up like a burrito and you lay them down. Like there's only so much you can do that. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And it's really kind of more of like trying to offset the pressure and the responsibility that my wife had through that whole process. And it was like, it was really more of like 3 months of figuring out how can I be helpful and be of value there. But I would say it was a little rough because I'm a little bit more transparent with myself, and I'm pretty honest with myself. And I remember, so the way we had structured it is I would take the late night feeding because my wife would pump, and then I would do the late night feeding. So I would take her from about 10 at night until about 6 or 7 in the morning, and then Annalise would sleep through it so she would get rest. That was kind of our rhythm right out of the gate. That was kind of how we did it. And so our schedules were a little off than what we were used to as a husband and wife. And I remember those quiet nights of like, I've never been a dad. I grew up in a household where kind of anger and frustration were kind of the main emotion towards the tail end. And I remember watching my daughter and just kind of looking at her as she was sleeping, just kind of going, I don't have a clue. I have no clue. And I just got honest with myself, and I was like, I remember just talking to her. She was laying there, and I was at my computer, and she was in a bassinet next to me, and she was sleeping. And before she had to do her, 12th diaper change, I remember just looking at her, and I just started speaking to her, and I started telling her that I was like, I'm going to screw up. I'm going to make mistakes. I was like, and I apologize, you're going to be my first, but. And when I say my first, I mean like she's not my mistake, but as in like all of my learning up to this point, like she's first experiment number one kind of thing. And I just told her, but I was like, I will not abandon you. I will always be there. I will figure it out, and I will give you my best, and you will know who your dad is. So those 3 months were really key for me because it allowed me. There wasn't any demands of me in that moment. It was really a lot of that silent battle inside of going, preparing myself because prior to, and again, this is first lesson, second opinion, but prior to my daughter being born, all that, I did a deep dive and done some relationship studies and so on and so forth. And I came to the realization that a lot of the stuff that's wrong in this world, like especially like if you're Christian, like it's kind of like a tongue-in-cheek situation where like it was Eve's fault for why everything is why we and I don't agree with that. I really honestly think it was the fault of man. I don't think it was the fault of Eve. And I think a lot of the things that are wrong and broken in the world is because the failure of men not stepping up and leading with character. And I found that to be true from a lot of my experiences from serving women and serving my wife, that in most relationships, especially if they're coming from like an abandoned relationship where like the father's been absent or whatever, or the marriage broke, whatever, and they don't have an understanding. Oftentimes men don't realize it, that when they enter that relationship with that lady who has that broken past, so to speak, most men don't realize that they got to carry the cross in that scenario. And what I mean by that is that subconsciously, a lot of women don't, like if they've been abused or hurt or whatever, like, some trauma there. A lot of times it's that man, he doesn't realize it, but he's paying for the sins of the men in her life that have failed to value her and treat her the way she was, the abandonment issues and stuff like that. And so even though that man may not be doing anything wrong, but because out of ignorance and not fully understanding kind of where she's at and what she's struggling with, and she's emotionally processing that, he doesn't realize he stepped into all these wrongs. And I think secretly she's hoping that he will
Mm-hmm.
uh, heal it, so to speak.
Right.
Uh, and so stepping into that, one of the things I wanted to make sure is that my daughter, that she was loved, that she was wanted, that I'm not going to do it perfectly, um, but I'm going to do the best I can to set the example with her. And really, in a lot of ways, when I'm done and gone, I want to set it up so that the next man that enters her life, when she's handed off, he doesn't have to go through all the stuff that I had to go through, because a lot of people don't make it through it. A lot of relationships, they don't have a crystal ball, so to speak, to look ahead and see the reward, because when you're in the struggle, it's so hard. And one of the things I want to make sure, the best of my ability and my current level of understanding, is that the future guy that takes responsibility there, he's not having to start behind the eight ball. They could start off
Right.
with a healthy, process. But I also, at the same time, I want my wife, or I want my daughter, to be brought up where she has a healthy judge of character too, if
Mm-hmm.
that makes sense. And I think a
Yeah.
lot of that healthy judge of character will stem from the security and the environment that's established, between myself and my wife. Now, granted, a lot of that is hypothesis, but we'll find out as we get farther into the race. Um,
Yeah.
so that's my hope and my desire. I oftentimes, when I do make a mistake, or I have to, I discipline out of reaction versus, slowing down. And I notice I'm wrong. I'll go into her room and I'll kneel down beside her bed and I will apologize to her, because I want her to know, I want her to see humility, and I want her to see that, as a dad, that like, I'm going to seek to try to make it right, especially if I'm in the wrong, because I want her to know
Mm-hmm.
that, like, I love her, and my pride and my ego is not greater than my love for her. Um, and we have a really unique relationship. It's really cool, and
Yeah.
I'm loving every minute of it.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm loving what you're saying, and that kind of going to take us into the next part of the next segment, should I say, of the podcast, which is called the Getting to the Core segment, which is a segment that was built off our the ebook of the Core Four, which we talked about a little earlier, which is the Core Four values that every daughter should get from her father. Right. And so I wrote that ebook kind of with the same mindset that you have, because I realized some time ago that every woman I ever dated throughout my whole life was a fatherless daughter. And so realizing that, my thought was, what can I do to help this, this demographic that I keep attracting, or am attracted to, however you want to look at it. And so I came up with the core for just from the values of, number one, being a girl dad, number two, having five sisters, and then also being raised by my father and watching my father navigate through the raising of my five sisters, who are all five different personalities, five different ages, and really thinking about what is it that, at its core, what are those values that he planted into my sisters? What are those values that I wanted to plant in my own daughter? And so I came up with the core four, which is the core four values that every daughter should get from her father. And to my listeners, you guys can get your copy of the core four at ebooksbyejames.com. And so, Dustin, I'm gonna go over them real quick. The core four that I believe are the important are guidance, affirmation, love and affection, and protection. So, of those four, which one? And I know they're all important, but which one do you personally think is probably will be on the top of your list to make sure that you instill in your daughter?
Um, Yeah, it's pretty tough. Not to like one up it or anything like that. I'm not necessarily like a guy that recreates the system.
Mm-hmm.
I think my desire is to just show the character of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way I know how to do it is model it. Um, I want her to know that she's loved. I want to be slow to anger with her. I don't want to suffer past offense with her. I want her to know that she accepted. And a lot of my studying that I've discovered is that the four basic human needs in any relationship out there is purpose, identity, acceptance, and security. People crave these four things above all others. If you look at 2020 in its full dynamic, security was broken. When people were, almost bullied into wearing masks, it became a level of acceptance. You don't accept me if, blah, blah, if you don't wear the mask. Then it became a purpose, and then it became an identity. And I think people in all relationships look for these four things. I find it even with being a dad to a daughter is my daughter oftentimes just wants to know that I accept her. Acceptance doesn't necessarily mean I have to agree with everything that she does, but I accept her in her brokenness, but I also want to love her towards a more cultivated image. Security is, I she wants to know that I'm there, that I'm present, that and I think men provide a lot more than just financial. I think that's actually a really shallow way of looking at it. I think men provide, um, things like an atmosphere, an identity. I think it's really important for a dad to make sure that a girl knows that she's beautiful and that she's loved. An area that I'm noticing that I'm having to wrestle a little bit with is that my children, um, even though my son and my daughter are kind of best friends, um, but they don't realize it. Like when you step back, when they fight with each other, especially when it comes down to time with me, they're fighting for my love, and they don't realize that that's what they're doing is they're competing to try to get me to love them first, if that makes sense. They're trying to jockey for position, and I have to slow down and let them know that I don't love them more or less than the other, and they can't do anything to earn more or less, um, and so I think it's a level of security, but also leads into acceptance and an identity. And I think it's also a role of a father to set like a family identity. We love hard. Um, you know, we're quick to forgive. So there's some purposes there, and there's some things. And so I try not to recreate the wheel because I really feel like the wheel's already been created, and I think there's been a phenomenal example there. Um, I just don't think we have enough men out there modeling some things. But I also don't think men are supposed to be shallow, and I don't think we should be doormats either. I think we should have confidence, and I think we should have a boldness. An area that I didn't get growing up was is I didn't really have an advocate for me in some scenarios, and I think there are times where a dad, whether it's right or wrong, that kid needs to see the dad step in there and advocate for their kid. And there was a scenario that happened where my daughter, she said there was like a ghost in her room or something like that. And my wife kind of played it off. And I went to play it off too, because I was just kind of following that a little bit. And I just kind of got flipped. And I was like, you know what? I always want to believe my child. Even though like my life experiences and stuff like that, I'm like, I want to believe my child. And I remember getting up off the couch. I was tired and everything like that. My wife and I were about to transition to kind of our time. We had given our best to everybody. And my wife was like, where are you going? And I looked at my wife and I said, I want my daughter to know that I always believe her. And I walked into her room and I said, what's going on? And so she said, there's a ghost. And I said, where's the ghost? Because I wanted her to know that like I'm here to protect and all this other stuff. And she pointed, well, we had a blackout curtain over the window, and in the ceiling, there was a vent and it was kind of blowing on it. So it was moving the curtain. So she thought there was a ghost in there. And I said, there's no ghost there. And she's like, yeah, there is. And so I had to explain some things, but I went in there with this mentality that I want to believe you,
Mm-hmm.
and I want to protect you, and I want you to know that no matter how bad it gets, I'm in your corner. It doesn't mean that we're not going to figure some stuff out together, and it doesn't mean that I might eat some humble pie, but through this process we're gonna figure this out.
Right.
Uh, and she went right to sleep when my presence came into that room, and she knew it was going to be okay. She went right to sleep with no issue or anything like that. Um, and I think it's another area that I think dads provide is this sense of protectiveness. And I honestly think that a lot of trauma that happens in a kid's life is simply because parents become so distracted and absorbed in certain things that um, opportunity is opened up for things to happen. Um, and I'll land with this. And I didn't fully answer your question just simply because just kind of more of the way my mind works is like I don't try to recreate the wheel. Um, is um, accidents happen when responsibility is forfeited. And I think a guy's job is, I don't want to say you never rest, but as a parent, um, you don't get the luxury of rest in that scenario because your job is to cultivate and your job is to grow and you can never abandon your post in that scenario because, you know, all it takes is one time. But I've discovered that like I can't protect my kids from every scenario that comes their way, but
Mm-hmm.
I can insulate them and condition them to be strong in how to handle situations when I'm not present. And I think it's a role of a dad. And I think it's unfair and I think it's selfish to try to pawn that off on a woman and sit there and say you have to double dip roles. And then they come into a relationship expecting that wife to respect them, appreciate them, value them, or even give themselves to them because they think it's a female's job or whatever their view of marriage is. And then they wonder why there's contention there because she's having to play a masculine role and she has to play a feminine role when she's not so hardwired to be that. When that's
Mm-hmm.
where you're as a man kind of comes in and we provide certain things. And women naturally crave security. It's hardwired into them. I've discovered my wife doesn't necessarily need billions of dollars, even though if I can provide it, sure, why not?
Right.
But she wants to know that it's going to be okay. She wants
Yeah.
to know that together between us, we're going to figure it out, and it's going to be an us thing. And it's same with kids. So a lot of our stuff is a family thing. Kind of long-winded answer there.
No, no, it was great. And man, I don't even want to follow it up, right? We're gonna end it on that, right? So I'm gonna say, first of all, Dustin, I definitely appreciate you coming on, man, and sharing your story and your insight, and that's why I'm not even gonna try to top that last answer, because I think you said so much important stuff, that I just want to leave our listeners right there, right, and they can rewind if they even if they need to kind of go back and listen to anything, listen to exactly what you said. So again, thank you so much for being on. Thank you for being a guest. Is there any social media presence or anything you want to leave the audience with where they can follow
That is an
you?
area I'm not the strongest in.
Okay.
I'm not as connected to social media because a lot of my mental energy is really focused on kind of what it is that I'm doing at that time.
Right.
My wife's a little bit more the social butterfly, even though,
Right.
like,
Yeah.
believe it or not, I'm introverted and I just said a lot. Um, I do love to give if I'm in a position to give.
Mhm.
But on the social media side of things, I'm not as connected.
Right.
So if anybody wants to find me or get in touch with me or whatever, track my wife down. I
Right.
think you have all her stuff there.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah.
she's
That's what
kind
I
of
was
like
going to
my little,
say.
she's my little my walkie-talking
Right.
calendar. She kind of plans things, and um, so
Yeah, yeah, and no doubt. And to all my listeners, if you guys are listening to this episode, if you go to the episode right before this one, you'll be able to hear my episode that I did with Annalise, and awesome episode just as much as this one. And so definitely we'll make sure that all their information is also put into the descriptions. So again, I want to say thank you, Dustin, so very much for sharing your time and your experience with us. To my listeners, I want to tell you guys thank you also. Make sure you guys go to our website, or to my personal website, should I say, the dealhealfulfill.org, in order to check out myself and everything that I have going on, and even possibly book me to come out to be a speaker, or a to host a workshop there. And so make sure you guys go to dealhealfulfill.org, which is my mission, to help people to deal, heal, and fulfill, to deal with your problems, to heal from the pain, and to fulfill your purpose. Thank you guys once again for tuning in to the Girl Dad Discussions podcast, where our mission is to amplify the voices of girl dads to the world, in order to combat the narrative of the absent father and the fatherless daughter. And so until next time, you guys be blessed. Thanks for listening to the Girl Dad Discussions podcast with E. James. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and subscribe to our podcast on all your podcast listening platforms. Also, don't keep it to yourself, but share it with someone else, that the Girl Dad Discussions podcast is on the air. Until next time, be blessed.